and welcome to A Woman's Heart. This is Lisa Granger, and welcome to the final episode of our Christmas Traditions series. If you missed any of the earlier shows, you can check them out on the radio station's website, my website, or your favorite podcast platform. I also released another series, People of the Nativity, on the podcast, where we dove into the characters of the shepherds, Elizabeth, Joseph, Mary, and the wise men. Today, I have Pastor Gary Houseman of Berea Christian Church in Wytheville, Virginia, and we are talking about how to keep the spirit of Christmas going into the new year and beyond. We also talk about the traditions of the wise men and the 12 days of Christmas. So sit back and savor a few more moments of Christmas with my guest, Gary Houseman, today. Welcome to A Woman's Heart, Pastor Gary Houseman. We're very privileged to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad to have the opportunity.
Yes. Now, you are the pastor at Berea Christian Church out in the western part of Virginia, aren't you?
Yes, we're in Wythe County. We're located at 996 Berea Road, Wytheville, Virginia. We have a whole road that's named after us.
Oh, okay. Well, very good. Very good. Well, I have not had the privilege of really since I live in Williamsburg. I heard wonderful things about you and your church, but I would love for the listeners to have a chance to get to know you. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was born and raised here. I live within a quarter of a mile of where I've always lived. I was in education for 31 years. I was a teacher and a coach and a high school principal and a director of secondary education. I have a doctorate in educational administration or educational leadership, rather, from Virginia Tech. I retired from the school system after 31 years and went into the ministry, and I've been at Berea Christian Church for the past 17 years.
Wow, very good. And as we discussed earlier, sometimes it's nice to be spoken well of as the pastor, since being a principal and a teacher and being in education can be very difficult these days.
Oh, it can, and I'm glad that I retired, when I did. But it was great because, in all honesty, it prepared me for what I'm doing right now. When I was 18, I thought I wanted to go into the ministry, but then life got in the way, and got married early, and but then when I was 53, I was ready to leave the school system and go into the ministry, and so it's worked out really well.
Yeah, very good. Well, I am glad you were able to retire, and I am a big proponent that God can use all of it. He can use everything that we have gone through to kind of fit it all together and make a beautiful puzzle out of all those pieces.
Oh, I think so too. I mean, when it says that, we know that God works all things together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose, and so I believe that, and I've lived it.
Yes, yes, you have. Yes, you have. Now, I spoke to you or got in touch with you about the Christmas traditions in the series that we've been going through. And this conversation is actually going to air after Christmas, right around New Year's. So it's kind of some of those traditions of after Christmas. And I looked into a lot about the 12 days of Christmas, and we're looking towards the wise men and all of those other cool things as far as that. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how can we take some of those Christmas traditions that we do during the Advent season, looking towards Christmas and the joy and the peace and some of that gift giving and all the holiday magic, how do we use that as a reset and keep it going through the new year?
Well, I think the one thing that you said that's important is you use the word joy, not happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I love Christmas. I love the Christmas trees. I love all the songs. I love the lights. I love everything about that. And most of that is secular, but it's fun and it
Mm-hmm.
makes me happy. But that's not where the joy comes from. And of course, when we think about Advent, we do think about celebrating the coming of Christ, from the Old Testament prophecies until He was born. Now we look forward to his return, and so we look forward to that Advent. But
Hmm.
there's another Advent I think that we should look at, and that is the Advent of when we come to know Christ. And so all that together should give us joy, not just happiness, but it should be a lasting feeling. And yeah, it's very easy. I remember Andy Rooney. Do you remember him?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay,
I'm not
I
that young.
remember. I remember him saying one time that there is nothing as over as Christmas the day after. Um,
Mm.
and I always thought, it was awful to say that, but it's the way that some people think. As when the 25th is over, Christmas is over. And in actuality, Christmas should just be beginning.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I know that in Old Testament times, God gave the Jewish people, gave the Israelites feast and festivals, to mark the year and to remember Him.
Hmm.
Well, the Christian calendar basically does the same thing, and so we've just started a new year, with the beginning of Advent. So I know that some churches will not even sing Christmas carols until Christmas Day because they want to make sure that they're in the proper season. But it's so easy. It's so easy to just forget about Christmas as soon as the 25th, is over. But when I talk about the spirit of Christmas, we have to realize it's not the spirit of Christmas, it's the spirit of Christ.
Yes,
And
I agree.
and the spirit of Christ doesn't end at the end of December.
Hmm.
And really, New Year's, I know when we were talking right before, you were talking about New Year's resolutions and that sort of thing. And I know that the new year, January 1st, is just a day on the calendar,
Yeah.
just like any other day. And sometimes, though, people do make resolutions. It may be a time for us to renew, but not about losing weight or stopping eating so much chocolate uh, or that
Never.
sort of thing. But it it may be a good opportunity, for us to renew our faith and think about the Spirit of Christ living in us, so that we can share that with others.
Yes. Well, and technically, with the church, when I was looking into it's the 12 days of Christmas that started on Christmas Day. And it's the Advent season that we, I guess, secularly or commercially think of as the Christmas season. But that's really Advent, where we're waiting for and looking forward to the coming of Christ. And then the 12 days of Christmas, that time between Christmas Day and January 6th, or Epiphany, which is
Mm-hmm.
when we technically celebrate kind of the wise men coming, even though we know he didn't really come only 12 days after Jesus was born. It
Right.
could have been up to 2 years, but
Yeah.
we're not going to celebrate that long. We don't have that long to wait.
Huh.
So it's that 12 days, and those were like feast days to celebrate the Christmas season was those days. And they even came up with the 12 days of Christmas, which that was a very interesting topic that I looked at too.
Well, yeah, the Christmas season does go from Christmas Day to Epiphany, but again, in our secular world,
Hmm.
we have just reversed that. We have put Christmas in the Advent season, and then after Christmas, it's just kind of we as soon as December 25th is over, then we start looking the next week. We know that the New Year is coming, and so yeah, we kind of celebrate backwards a little bit.
Yeah, I think we do. And Jesus has come as a baby. He certainly didn't come the way a lot of people expected him to come. And he still doesn't always show up in our lives the way we expect him to or want him to. And so he's born, and then we celebrate that afterwards. And I thought it was very interesting that there's several different theories on the 12 days of Christmas, the song. So now that everyone's thought of on the first day of Christmas, my true love sent to me, now that everyone has that in their head, you're welcome. there's several theories on it actually having some hidden meanings, which they say
Right.
is really a myth. But I did think it was like actually it would have been a pretty clever idea, even if it is a myth, it's a pretty clever idea to use those 12 days. And I don't know, had you ever heard of the 12 days of Christmas having a hidden meaning with the Catholic Church?
Well, I have, and then, the partridge in the pear tree is what symbolizes Christ.
Yes. Yes, and
Yes,
the whole idea of
and
the mother partridge sacrificing
yes,
herself for the baby is like, when Christ said, "I wish I could gather you under my wings," and, talking
right.
about
Like a,
Jerusalem.
yeah,
Yeah, I had heard that, and then the other one, let's see here, the rest of them, the partridge in the pear tree is supposed to represent Jesus Christ. The two turtle doves are the Old and the New Testament.
Testament. Mhm.
The three French hens are faith, hope, and love or charity. The four calling birds are the four gospels. The
Mhm.
five golden rings are the first five books of the Old Testament. Six geese a laying are the 6 days of creation. Seven swans a swimming were the gifts of the Holy Spirit. The eight maids a milking, the eight beatitudes. The nine ladies dancing are the nine fruits of the Holy Spirit. 10 lords a leaping, the 10 commandments. The
Mhm.
11 pipers piping, the 11 faithful apostles. And then the 12 drummers drumming are the 12 points of doctrine in the Apostles' Creed. So I know there's a lot on the internet about that being, though, this was all created. And they said, yeah, no, not really. But it's actually pretty creative in my mind.
Well, yeah, and if it helps people to understand,
Hmm.
I think that's a wonderful thing
Yeah.
because you know Jesus, when he taught in parables, and he told stories that people would understand. If you think about his Sermon on the Mount, it wasn't this deep theological, all the stuff that the people wouldn't be able to understand. He talked to them in terms of their understanding and at their
Hmm.
level. And so, if you can take anything like the 12 days of Christmas and you can put that meaning, behind it, and it helps somebody, I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a great. They say really it was probably just kind of a fun game for children, and there's maybe a French origin, but originally the lyrics we know of were actually done in 1909, is what I
Yeah.
found out. As far as that goes, but lots of fun history about that. But I think that for me, it's that kind of what we've talked about. The Advent is the looking forward to, even though we kind of celebrate Christmas then, this is when the real celebration begins. Is he is born, he's here. He's actually, we could touch him if we wanted to, and that's the real exciting part.
Well, it is, and again, we have a tendency to do it backwards. But just think about the shepherds out that night.
Mhm.
You've been out, and everybody probably has been out on a cold, dark night. And if you've been away from the city lights, the sky is just absolutely full of stars. And then the angel, shows up. What a scene. I mean, and then that, of course, they went in to see the baby Jesus, and then they left and they were rejoicing. They were telling everybody about it. But, not so much before he was born, but
Yeah.
when he was born. So
Mhm.
that's when the celebration should really begin.
And the thing that I think we forget is when we have frequently, the church has somewhat sanitized, I will say, the nativity story, because we just think of them, oh, okay, they're shepherds and they come into the barn. And in our nativity scenes, our barns are clean, the shepherds are fairly clean cut. And back then, the shepherds were the lowly of the lowly, and no one would have expected to hear the good news of Christ being born from a shepherd. That was just, that would not have been expected at all. They were the lowly of the lowly. I mean, almost like the beggar in the street coming up and saying, "Hey, I got to be one of the first ones to see Jesus. Angels came." And we'd be going, "Uh-huh, yeah, right."
Well, that's true. And I mean, people didn't even think that they told the truth about anything. So when they went out and proclaimed that, you cannot think in that time period how Christ could have come and been announced in any more humble situation
Mhm.
than he was.
Yeah.
I think that is so important for us to understand because it is just like us. Yeah, he was not born in a palace. He wasn't born to rich parents, and most of us were not either.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think that it's very important for us to to understand the meaning of that he humbled himself to come to earth.
Yeah, yes, he did. And then you look at the shepherds, and then that Christmas, that 12 days after going into Epiphany, it goes from shepherds to wise men. And these wise men, you go, okay, they're also known as kings, but they were not Jewish, and they certainly weren't Christian because there were no Christians then. They weren't Jewish. They were not religious leaders per se. They were astrologers, or they were pagans, really. But they had still seen something in the skies and knew about the Jewish prophecies. And they were like, this is such a big event. We need to check this out. And to me, I just think it's so important and so meaningful that God has gone from the shepherds to these wise men. He doesn't go to the high priest necessarily in the temple. He goes to pagans far away that are astrologers and using the stars, and he uses shepherds out in the field. And to me, I think it goes to God can use anything and anyone to get his point across.
Oh, well, he can. But when you think about the wise men, there's some that believe that the wise men actually were kind of a continuation of Daniel. I mean, Daniel
Hmm.
was
Okay.
was in Babylon, and of course, Daniel was one of the magicians or magi in King Nebuchadnezzar's court,
Mm-hmm.
and so we know that Daniel never came back to Israel. There's some debate as to where the wise men or the magi came from, whether it was Persia, Babylon, or somewhere else. But I like to think of it this way: if Daniel was one of the learned men of his time,
Yes, he was.
and he taught what was in the scripture, maybe not to change their faith, but to show them what was there. And so I've often thought that, I say, for about 500 years after Daniel, these wise men, these magi, kept looking and kept looking and kept looking because they knew that a star was supposed to appear. Can you imagine 500 years later, all of a sudden these guys, hey, we're it. We're it. We see the star. We get to go and see if we can find this person who's born King of the Jews. That, to me, I can imagine the excitement that they felt
Mm-hmm.
because they saw that star that had been predicted for so long, and they were the ones that were going to act on it.
Yeah, yeah, they were. And yeah, the excitement of being able to say, oh my gosh, that's something that is so different. And you think, I've looked up at the stars and they're beautiful, they're already majestic. That had to be for you to pack up everything and everyone and get those gifts that were extremely valuable. That was something larger than normal in the sky. That had to be really pretty dang spectacular. It wasn't just something that they saw through a telescope. It had to be something really very spectacular because you think of everything they went through to pack up all their stuff and travel up to what we think could have been 2 years to keep
Mm-hmm.
following this star.
Well, and of course, the Bible tells us that God has given us, signs in the heaven, and so
Hmm.
they were following that. Yeah, and so we do think it may have been as much as 2 years when they found. Of course, they went to Herod first, and you know the story.
Yeah.
They asked where was he who's born King of the Jews, which I'm sure scared Herod to death
Oh yeah.
because Herod thought that he was King of the Jews. He was
He's
King
like,
of
"What do you mean?
Israel, and
That's me."
yeah, and so of course, he played along, and he said, "Listen, when you find him, come and let me know so that I can go worshiping too." But this is the thing that I really like. And you were talking about them being pagan, that they were not Jewish, and they came from a foreign land, and that is true. But when we read their story, in Matthew, when they bring the gifts, before they give the gifts to the Christ child, it said that they worshiped him. They
Mm.
bowed down and worshiped him, and then they gave him the gifts. So, regardless of what they thought they were going to find, when they came to him, there was such awe, there was such amazement, I think, on their part that they understood who he was, and they bowed down and worshiped him, and then they gave him the gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd never really quite thought of it that way, but you're right. They did. They worshiped him. They recognized who he was, and they did. They gave him praise. And hopefully we can use that to continue on and just keep praising throughout that whole Christmas season, that after Christmas and New Year's and then beyond, and use it as a reset to continue to praise him.
Well, and you were talking about how God uses situations. I've often thought this, Mary and Joseph were not wealthy people, but
Mm-mm.
they had to travel to Egypt to get away from Herod, and they had to live down there. But guess what? God had provided them with some
Mhm.
valuable things: gold,
Yes.
frankincense, and myrrh. So I think that there's a very good chance that they used that to be able to go and live in Egypt until it was time to come home. And so that also amazes me.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's amazing how at times when we truly are doing what God has called us to do, that He will make those provisions possible.
Oh, he will. He will make a way. And as you said earlier, in a way, maybe not the way that we thought or the way that we even want,
Mhm.
uh, but he will make a way. But the thing is, we have to listen and we have to respond.
Yes.
And that's what's going to keep the Christmas spirit going
Mhm.
throughout the year. Again, as I said, it's not the Christmas spirit, it's the spirit of Christ, it's the spirit of peace. When Jesus was getting ready to leave his disciples, of course, he was talking to them in the book of John, and he said, in this world, you'll have trouble, but take
Mhm.
heart. I've overcome the world. And then he said, I'm going to leave my peace with you, not as the world gives, but as I give. So, yeah, that is so amazing to me. And again, to me, that is part of the spirit of Christmas, the spirit of Christ, that we can have peace in the midst of chaos. We can have peace in the midst of trouble. We can have peace in the midst of pain.
Mhm.
And that is how we carry the Christmas spirit with us, I think.
Yeah, and as he said, it's not the peace of the world, because certainly there's a lot of places in the world right now that are not peaceful at all. And it's not a worldly peace, because to me the worldly peace is just that calm, quiet, no conflict. And the peace that he gives, as you mentioned, is that peace in the midst of
Yes.
other stuff. It's kind of the peace and it's the peace in the midst of it. And instead of just a nice, calm, quiet lake, it's more like a bird in the middle of a swirling river. It's that peaceful spot in the middle of everything else going crazy around. And that only comes from a deeper place.
Well, it does, and again, that's the spirit of Christ. And I often think, how do we do that? How do we have peace?
Mm-hmm.
How do we rely on the peace of Christ? And I think about what Paul wrote in Romans in chapter 12 of he said, if it is possible, as long as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
so Paul puts, I mean, as far as our peace with other people, because if we are in constant conflict with other people, we're not going to have that inner peace. And
Yeah.
so, I've often thought about that. What he's saying, there may be some people that you're not going to be able to live at peace with, but don't let it be because of you.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I know that is later on in the New Testament, but again, like I said, that's the spirit of Christmas.
Yeah.
Is as far as it depends on you, don't be the cause of conflict. Don't be the cause of chaos. Live at peace with everyone.
Yes, yes, I think so. And I love several of the points that we've made with the joy and the peace and going forward, and that God can use just about anyone. And I know a lot of times with resolutions, people do. They make their resolutions going into a new year about losing weight or whatever. And I know years ago, I was encouraged not so much to have a goal oriented resolution, because a lot of times you just give up on those, and then you get you just let it go. And the majority of people have already quit their resolutions by the first 2 weeks of January. But
Yeah.
I was encouraged to instead pick a word or more of a theme to overarch around the year. And to me, something like that with the Christmas, either using joy as something for the year or peace throughout the year, and using that as somewhat of a, I don't know, a mantra, something like that to take us through the rest of the year.
Well, I think you're right. And I talk so much about peace in sermons and in church and to other people because honestly, I think that that's what we're all looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because if we have peace, we will have that joy, we will have that assurance, and we'll have that confidence. But if we don't have that inner peace, everything is in conflict. And yeah, so to have a word like you said, either joy or peace or assurance, to constantly kind of just keep that in your mind
Mm-hmm.
as you go through the year. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess as we were talking that and we're kind of starting to wrap up, I know one of the questions I always like to ask is, what would you say to encourage someone to do what God is calling them to do? And I think of the wise men; they were looking at the stars, and they sought Him out, and they put it together, they put it into action, and they followed, and it wasn't a normal thing. And so what would you say, I know the new year people are looking forward to doing that. Maybe this is that extra nudge they needed to step out and do what God wanted them to do. But what would you say to encourage them to do that?
Well, I think what I would tell people is to listen and make God's plan your plan instead of trying to make your plan God's plan.
Mhm.
Uh, because if we will listen, and sometimes it's just being quiet. Elijah, when he was out, he didn't hear God in the thunderstorm. He didn't hear him in the earthquake, but he heard him in that small, quiet voice. And
Mhm.
so we need to listen to what God is telling us and then act on that. That's too often, and this is where we run into chaos and we run into conflict. We know what we want to do, and we want to put that on God,
Mhm.
and say, God, this is what I need.
This is what I want. Bless it now.
Yes, that's exactly right, and that is not the way. That's not the way God works. So what I would say to people is listen, and listen to what God is telling you in your spirit, and follow that, and try to make sure that you're not trying to force your opinion on God, but let God give you His thoughts.
Yes. Okay. I can second that one. I think that is excellent advice and counsel for people. Now, Gary, if somebody wants to know more about you or your church, how can they find out a little bit more about you?
Well, we have a Facebook page, Berea Christian Church. They also can find me on Facebook if they like. Gary Houseman, Gary M Houseman, and they can message me through Facebook if they like to. If
Okay.
there's anything that I can do to help someone, that'd be great.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Gary, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts as we go into the Christmas season, the real Christmas season, and then into the new year and all of that. I really appreciate your taking the time to spend with us today.
Well, thank you. And what I'd like for us to do is prove Andy Rooney wrong. That
Okay.
that that Christmas continues after Christmas Day.
Yes, yes. Okay, let's prove him wrong. Let's go for that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me today on A Woman's Heart with Lisa Granger, where we offer hope, encouragement, and real life application to walk closer to God. Today's conversation is part of a series on Christmas traditions, which I pray will help you enjoy the holiday season and point you to Jesus, whose birth we are celebrating. I would love to know what some of your favorite Christmas traditions are. You can let me know on social media or email me at lisa@lisagranger.com. For a bonus episode from a previous Christmas series on People of the Nativity, head to my website, lisagranger.com, or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Merry Christmas.